But what was that crypto key you had there, Loughy, again?
Yeah.
It's all wildly confusing. That much.
It's crazy, man.
I've got the buffer of death.
Yeah, that's fine. I might have to buy that Pepe one. How about that ridiculous shit?
Yeah, is Pepe even a thing anymore? That was a big thing on like 4chan and 8chan and all that stuff.
Which is what I'm going to hope, like, I could bring it back for some lunatics to pay me some money with.
I need to hit a soccer game today. That's what I need.
I'm thinking about, Ben, I was legitimately thinking about paying for a battle bot.
Yep. They minted, right?
Not yet. The floor is like 0.12. And I think that's because people paid so much for gas on the 0.035 mint.
Josh bought some like Apple for 4 ETH this morning.
What?
Like, yeah, I'm like, what?
What? Not 0.4?
Oh.
All right, welcome in. We've made it. It's a Friday. We'll get you ready for the weekend and beyond here. It's the Awesemo Fantasy Football Show. Myself, Loughy, Rasa, all three of us in the house. Chris producing. We'll tell you all about Underdog and, again, the continued amount of money that you can win. If it's the Millie Maker or the puppies, wherever you can, we'll give you the promo code and all here for Awesemo. We don't ask much, and that's just to smash away on that thumbs up button. Make sure you're subscribed. Never miss a show with a notification bell, so you're not straggling and late asking if Rasa has already hit on his favorite running back of the day. Gentlemen, we've made it to Friday, but I think more importantly, we have made it to the final week of the preseason. It's been a lot of fun doing these shows, but I can't wait until it matters when we actually have real rankings and updates and everything, as opposed to just looking as we will today with running backs and some timed backfield as far as handcuffs and beyond, but getting to when it matters finally.
Yeah, it's let me say this much. It's been an interesting day. Because first of all, you're over there multitasking. I'm just going to say it, feeding the baby. I mean, it's impressive, dude. It's very impressive. And on the other side, you weren't in the room yet, Eytan.
Yes.
But Ben, as I jump into the room, we're having our normal discussion before the show starts. And I just, out of curiosity, I knew the better than he did, apparently. I said, Ben, your real name's Benjamin, right? And he says, yeah, I think. And that that's just set things off to on a whole different level. So yeah, doesn't know his name.
Wow. Wildly inaccurate. It's not what happened. Not what happened.
What happened?
There's no tape. The mics weren't hot. I'll take it to the grave.
Oh, okay. I got you what you're doing. Okay.
No, he was asking me. It was like I was taking like a citizenship test. He was, what's on your driver's license? What's on your debit card? Are you a junior? Is it this? He got me in some logic pretzel. I didn't know what the hell he was asking.
I just wanted to know what your real name was, and it took me pulling it out of you instead of just like, yeah, real name's Benjamin.
Oh my goodness. This is the man who moves here. Very secretive moves, Ben. I thought he was a doctor for the first 3 shows that we did. The scope is behind him, right? Screen left behind his right shoulder. They had a prop on the tip-off that was Dr. Ben Rasa's prop of the day. What the? I'm brand new. I fell for the happy birthday bit. You don't think I'm going to fall for the Dr. Rasa bit?
Not a doctor.
No.
Is this stream choppy? Is it buffering?
It is for me. I don't know if it's me or society.
Always.
Yeah. I think the stream is bad.
Okay. Well, we can still move it, right?
Yeah, I mean, we just keep going for now.
Yeah, right. It's not. We don't need to start over and replay that Rasa first name bit, right?
That will live. Hopefully, that part was lagging and no one even heard that.
No. Trust me, it buffered right before and after, so it's like that phone commercial where you only get a little bit of it. It's like Ben Rasa doesn't know his first name. That's what everybody took away with it.
Colin Anderson says, I'm calling the top for the NFT trade that the fantasy football gurus are talking about. First of all, not a guru. Second of all, been talking about NFTs for, I don't know, since January at this point. So
right. And we have Osaka today.
Not on stream. Oh, yeah. Oh, today. Yeah. Exciting.
Well, you already have two. So,
yeah, but I don't care. I just got rid of them. I said, I don't want these.
Wow. You got rid of them faster than people dumped Travis Etienne.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one today. Dude, I'll tell you what, there are so many running back battles that, and I just made a video on this. Check it out on the channel. It's pretty sweet. Running backs to draft after the 10th round. There are so many battles right now where the field, the people, your people drafting and all your fantasy football enthusiasts, even the gurus, as one might say, have already crowned certain players as the guy that needs to be drafted 4, 5, 6 rounds ahead of the other guy on their same team, even though it's very possible. And in some cases, even likely that it's going to be a timeshare. It's so weird how these rookies get mega hype. And I'm not saying it's always wrong or doesn't play out, but there's so where you see these rookies fly up the draft board and then the guy behind them ends up getting a ton of work. So I think it's a really interesting conversation.
No doubt. I mean, we've been talking about this, and that's why I'm ready for the games to kick off too, because at some point we get to see these guys in action. And like you said, it doesn't mean all rookies are overhyped and none of them are going to be good, but it does mean a lot of times that these conversations, they start to really snowball. And what we're going to talk about today, I'm really interested to get into a lot of guys that I don't think it's a given that we see their opportunities where people are gauging them. And obviously the news with Etienne and Sony Michel and some of the other big stories has kind of set the table for week one.
Don't worry. I can see
real quick. I'm sorry. I know
please.
the stream's choppy, working on that, but I think the audio is okay. So for now, if the audio is good, we'll just roll.
Just close your eyes and listen.
Yeah, just close your eyes. You don't need to see our ugly faces anyway.
Bilal on the stream is echoing that. The choppy video, however, the audio is cool. So
okay, cool.
We're in good shape there. Absolutely. And no matter what you're doing, it may improve the audio if you do close your eyes. I can echo that sentiment. But I just saw, I could feel a collective eye roll from the stream where maybe they're thinking we're going to jam in. You mentioned rookies and hype, a Kenneth Gainwell, just as an excuse to talk about a team here in this city that we've talked. Don't worry. They're not on the list. All right. So we may hint about what you can see tonight across the board as we get out of here, but they are not planned as far as the running back and the timeshares in the battles. I just wanted to get that out before anybody's thinking, here we go, another chance for them to work in Gainwell and the Eagles.
I get it. I still think Sanders is going to be the guy, but yeah, I think we've talked about that a lot. There's a lot of good ones to get into as well. Eytan, take it away, man, because there's a few of these I'm really looking forward to.
Well, let's start as far as where we have it right now. There was some news that came out from both the injury and the trade front. And we mentioned Etienne. We'll get to him in a minute. And I'll also tell you about Underdog, where you should be using our promo code already, Awesemo, for a $25 match, the Millie Maker, as well as a bunch of other awesome opportunities for you to jump into best ball drafts. The puppies are back, and it's over 3 million total in prizes, including the one for the big one there. So use our promo code Awesemo. But let's look at the trade. Let's look at Sony Michel to the Rams, how that now impacts that backfield. We also have news. A lot of people were anti the number change. 14, one of the ugliest numbers that you could wear. I was seeing on both social and chats. But really the implications now, let's start, Loughy, as far as, the trade that was from New England to the Rams, already seeing Sony Michel arrive. But what does that mean, of course, for Henderson and really the game planning moving forward?
I know there's a lot of people that just assume that Sony Michel's coming in only for depth purposes, and we haven't spoken about this yet, so I'm curious to know where you guys stand. I actually think he's going to be used, and I didn't want to do any videos on Darrell Henderson, like the videos on demand, the pre-recorded ones, and then I finally did, and he was my number one guy on a video I did the other day, and I even said I even said on the video I waited until later in the off or in the preseason and through training camp to do anything on Darrell Henderson because I was concerned that McVay was going to bring somebody in. And I think we're good. And then boom, that day, as I submit it, he hurts his thumb. And then the next day, or maybe one day after that, as the video was posted, here comes Sony Michel. They gave up a 4th and a 6th, right? One of them is it's a 5th that's going to convert to a 4th, or at least it's very likely that it will. That's not exactly nothing in terms of draft picks. It's, it's not like baseball or basketball where you get a late second and it means nothing. A 4th round pick, even at the end of it, the compensatory picks, it's still something. And Sony Michel was actually very good last year. He was 8th in yards per contact after attempt. He averaged a career high 5.7 yards per attempt. Granted, he only had like 76 carries and he was injured a bunch. But maybe it's possible that Sony Michel isn't terrible. He's looked good in the preseason. But more than anything, Darrell Henderson is the best pass catching back there. Sony Michel, I don't expect him to come in and become a workhorse, obviously. But would I be shocked if McVay, who has never in the past, when given the opportunity to, given Darrell Henderson like a full bell cow role, would I be shocked to see Sony Michel get enough touches to cut into Henderson's production and have me rank him lower than I originally did? Yeah, absolutely.
So the point you made at the end there is the point that came to my mind immediately, is that Sean McVay had ample opportunities to hand the keys over to Darrell Henderson, and he reluctantly never did it. They brought in Akers, they had other guys, and now they make this move. It's clear to me that there's no situation where, regardless of injuries, regardless of anything, that they're comfortable doing that. They would just keep bringing in guys to have some sort of role. Now, Henderson obviously is going to have some opportunities, but I think it's pretty clear that Sony Michel is not going to be an afterthought here, and he's the type of guy, touchdowns, things like that could really lean his way when you think about, lining up what do these guys do best. Certainly Henderson has the ability to catch the ball better, but Sony Michel is going to be a serious threat in this backfield, and I think it kind of muddies the water for both of them in a lot of regards of what we're going to see this year.
Yeah, we've seen him 156 average as far as ADP on Underdog for the position. We're going to talk about some of these other guys, but that's backup. Like, even if it's a Murray who's ahead of him, Madison, we'll talk about Philip Lindsay and what's going on there. But to both of your points here, there's a much more reasonable path to even splitting time than any of the guys in which he's kind of hovering with. So J.D. McKissick kind of right there below him. That's where I think that there's a lot of pathways here to taking, if he's still falling. I don't know how much it's going to influence this trade and people realizing that there's a pretty good chance of him just sharing or splitting to that. And we also don't know, look, to your points about the head coach, the neglecting, of Henderson there, then I don't necessarily know why there would be this default or just benefit of the doubt that it's not going to be some sort of hot hand. Meaning, if Sony Michel comes in and he's getting big gains, if he's looking comfortable in the offense, they don't have to go back to somebody on a 50-50 split. So I think there's a reasonable pathway, not only as you guys laid out, for him to be on the field, but also if he's rushing the ball well, that he would stay out there and it's not some sort of capped timeshare, if you will, on a pitch count.
Yeah, I think you could see different series, them rotate series. I think there's a lot you can do. This is what I know. I don't know much about this. What I do know is, and Ben said it too, like, do we trust McVay now that Sony Michel is in that backfield to give him that work? When it was Jake Funk and Xavier Jones, I was like, you know what? Darrell Henderson's clearly the best back here. Maybe they get some complimentary work or spell him. But bringing Sony Michel over, who actually, in terms of, he's a first-round pick. He has had some success at the NFL level. And he's proven that he's not awful. And I know you could maybe make an argument against that, but I think he's easily the second best back on this roster. And if that's the case, I expect him to get used. I still don't have a problem with Henderson. I just don't want to draft him as the RB19 anymore in the early fourth round. That's my issue.
Yeah, because at that ADP, he's being, kind of pegged for a role that I don't think he's going to have, as simple as that. So he would have to be absolutely ridiculously efficient. Honestly, Sony Michel, even if you don't think he's good, it doesn't really matter because he's going to get the opportunities. I don't see that changing. It's just not in the cards with the way the Rams are going to do this. So with you on Henderson, it's unfortunate because I'm a huge fan of his, but it's not to say he won't have a sizable role. It's just where he's going right now really doesn't budget in the Sony Michel situation.
For sure.
Now, the next area to look at is one where I just need to sit back and take my lumps here, because the show earlier in the week, not only was I bullish on Travis Etienne, but I was bucking both of you. And yes, Rasa, you were there in your subtle way. What
did I do?
Don't worry. I'm out of spite. I was prepared to take him higher for both of you. Now I can't. I look like an idiot. Loughy will tell you I got lucky and I probably saved myself from myself.
Yeah, you don't look like an idiot. You can't do anything about an injury, but I will say that, yeah, this is, and look, nobody wishes injuries upon anybody, but it might be a blessing in disguise for you, Eytan, that, you're not drafting Etienne at 50.
Right.
Even in that preseason game, James Robinson and Carlos Hyde were getting most of the rushing down work. And that was what scared the shit out of me. And I honestly am not convinced that it would have been any different in the regular season. So it's almost, to me, disappointing because, Etienne was going so early and ahead of other guys that are in better spots. But it's unfortunate if you drafted him there and now you're out a 5th round pick for the entire year. But I mean, I just thought he was going. And listen, could I have been wrong? Yeah, sure. Now we'll never know. No. But at the same time, even in the preseason, Etienne was not. And I know he got hurt, but James Robinson was the guy in terms of rushing. Like, there's no doubt about it. That's the way it looked. And it shouldn't be that surprising. Urban Meyer's been saying that from the beginning.
Yeah. And go ahead, Ben. I was just interested to see how you look at Hyde now from the point of view of, like, it's been such a chalk conversation with James Robinson that this definitely opens something up with Hyde.
Yeah, it kind of mirrors in some ways what we just talked about with the Rams and Sony Michel. Carlos Hyde, he's not going to the Canton anytime soon, but he's still going to have a role on this team. Touchdowns could tilt in his favor. James Robinson is obviously the better pass catcher. Etienne, it was difficult to really, I was more on the Loughy side of that, probably because of Urban Meyer with it. Percy Harvin's the guy that comes to mind. He's obsessed with that gadget type player.
He even said he could be the Percy Harvin style player.
He couldn't. But that's neither here. Listen, Etienne is great. He's a weapon, and listen, he'll be back he's got plenty of years to show his stuff, but now it does kind of clear the deck for James Robinson to once again, I think, be a fantasy asset. It's still a team, though. We've talked about this all year with Marvin Jones and the receivers, Trevor Lawrence under center. There's no solid, everything is a question mark, from the coaching to the quarterback to the receivers and now the backfield. That's a lot of variables, and that is a little troublesome for me.
Do you like Shenault more now?
That's what I was thinking.
I always like Shenault more.
But do you think Etienne, as that pass catching type player, who could have been lining up as a receiver, will open things up more for Shenault now?
Yeah, it has to. It has to reinforce. Look, you just laid out Percy Harvin and the gadget player and the guy that you could do multiple things with. So while just a workload standpoint, Carlos Hyde bumps up, from a look standpoint, from working as a 1 to 2 option in a game plan standpoint per passing play, I think Shenault's value only from that standpoint of who's below him. Like, if you were to create that position, whatever it may be, the gadget player on the depth chart, you'd have Shenault and then Etienne, right? For the most part. So there's nobody left. It's like carrying one quarterback. You have to play this guy until the guy gets hurt, and then you bring the 4th-string wideout out.
It's also, when you think about the gadget, and I kind of equate it to safety blanket too. Like, Marvin Jones is more, he's going to get his, but it's kind of over the top, more home run. Shenault, I think, can slide more into, okay, if Lawrence is really under a lot of pressure and he's checking down a lot, I think that Shenault could get that, where Etienne and Robinson will still, of course, be part of that conversation. But I do think it helps him. I was already high on him. They're going to be bad, but I think this is going to solidify some of that target share.
I also think you're going to have a ton of Shenault games which are like 7 for 40 and 0. And it's like very unappealing to me. Now, will he have some big games? Sure. But do you not worry that he's going to have a lot of these games where it's like average depth of target or is 3 yards for him, or he's got to create everything after the catch, which some guys can do well. It just feels like there's going to be a lot of instances where Shenault can break big ones off for sure, but is also like 5-yard catch, 6-yard reception, 4-yard reception, 9-yard reception, then maybe a 15 in there as well.
There's also, and just to look at it from the optics, I know Justin Fields had one or as a result of one of the biggest hits that we've seen. Every time Trevor Lawrence got hit, my goodness, it felt like he was thrown 3 or 4 feet into the air. And I just wonder if there has to be some sort of adjustments at some point if they can't protect him to that extent and stay healthy, and just getting the ball out as fast as humanly possible, and how that could also help if it's swing, if it's screen, if it's just moving the ball and the line as well. But he got beat up that last time out, and it was definitely something to watch.
Yeah, they're going to be bad. I mean, it's a bad team. Let's not forget that. Like, do I worry about Loughy, everything you were saying? Yeah, but it's almost a foregone conclusion with a team like Jacksonville, because they're going to throw in some absolute garbage games across the board. So I'm not going to put that as a negative mark specifically on Shenault. It's just a product of where he is at this point. They're not going to have a floor each and every week like some of these marquee teams.
Yeah, I always find it funny too that people, but there's so many people that are just willing to write off bad teams for fantasy purposes. And in some instances, yes, that makes sense. Like, you don't want to be loading up on an awful team, but picking and choosing, and actually, Eytan, we could head over to that. That's almost a perfect example. You mind if I make the transition here?
You do segue better than most, sir. Absolutely.
Let's do it. I think Philip Lindsay is one of the most interesting spots, because you've got a situation where David Johnson has clearly fallen out of favor with the Texans coaching staff. Mark Ingram, this is amazing. He's going into his 11th year, which is, it makes me feel old. You know, he's 31 now, 11th year in the NFL. Amazing. He doesn't have much left in the tank. We saw him fade big time in Baltimore last year as Dobbins and Gus Edwards took over. And people wonder about, like, well, yeah, but the Texans are going to suck. And I agree, right? I don't have any argument against them being bad, but I started looking some stuff up again for that video I did. It's like 2019, the Broncos were 30th in offensive touchdowns per game. And Philip Lindsay was still a top 20 running back with a 1,000-yard season last year. And this is what Ben made me think of this. Last year, the Jaguars were 1-15 and James Robinson was the RB7, right?
Yeah.
I'll throw you an even crazier one. The Giants were tied with the Jets for the fewest offensive touchdowns last year, right? Just an awful offense.
Without Barkley.
Did you know that from weeks 7 through 13, Wayne Gallman was the RB6?
Yeah.
Like,
that's amazing.
That's crazy. So bad teams can still produce decent value. And when it comes to someone like Philip Lindsay, you don't need him to be great. But what if he does end up being the guy? He was a back-to-back 1,000-yard rusher. He got hurt last year, played behind Melvin Gordon, and now he's in Houston. What if he does become that guy? This is kind of the way I look at it when it comes to backfield battles. Like, if I'm getting him at an ADP of 150 or whatever it is, what risk am I really taking for someone that, yes, they're on a bad team, but if he has the third down role, maybe it'll be David Johnson. It's possible. But what if Philip Lindsay takes over this backfield? He's still going to have utility each week based on the fact that you still get offensive possessions, even if you're bad.
Yeah, I mean, what you just brought up, all those guys to me have a common theme, and it's that they're not touchdown dependent to get there. Because when your team is awful,
right,
that's where it gets problematic if you need touchdowns. But guys like James Robinson and Philip Lindsay, they can get there because they can contribute in multiple ways. They can catch the ball. That gives you a huge floor because you're trailing every game, obviously, and you're going to rack up. Yeah, so that's how they get there. And it's an overlooked correlation in that sense. It's much more difficult if you're like, all right, this guy, he needs to score a lot, because to score a lot, you need the team to probably be pretty good. And the Texans have no chance to be good. They are stone dead. They are the worst team in the league. I don't think it's even close.
No, and let's look at this. You know, we expect Taylor. I know Mills, they're high on Davis Mills, but the bad team, they are high, not me.
No, I know.
Okay, not
He was
me. This
bad
is
in
not-
college. Give me a break.
He barely even was out. Like, look, we're assuming, right, that Deshaun Watson is definitely not playing for the Texans. Where he plays is inconsequential because we're focused on this backfield. But when I look at what you've laid out and the numbers, the DFS ranks that support where these running backs have been, there is still a bad quarterback or a quarterback that's new or just a quarterback that needs to be protected. And if your line is jack shit out there, you're going to stay committed. Like Houston can be 0-10. They're not going to give up on the run. They're still going to commit to the run. They're still going to try to make things as easy as possible. It's probably not going to work. But to that point, there's never going to be this abandonment of the run. And I'd even make the point that, as you talked about Philip Lindsay and what in Denver, you can still keep him in if you're down by 24-28, throw to him as well,
Right.
especially if there's a team teeing off in the pass rush.
That exactly. That would be my only concern is, does David Johnson take the third down role? Because the third down role in Houston is going to be really valuable, right? Like, I think it's going to be really valuable when you're playing against prevent defense, in the fourth quarter down by 30. So that's the thing. But I would make an argument that Tyrod Taylor is not that bad. So I know maybe you scratch your head at that. If you're watching this, I saw Ben kind of tweak his head a little bit, but real quick, man, I don't think he's that bad. Like, he was a starting quarterback last year before the Chargers tried to murder him.
He
right?
was sabotaged.
Yeah, they are like, we really want Herbert in there. No, but seriously, he was the starter. And then in the 3 seasons that he's been a starter, he's been the QB 15, 17, and 19. So he's averaged like QB 17, essentially middle of the road fantasy starter. I'm not saying Tyrod Taylor's good. I'm saying Tyrod Taylor is not just some absolute shitbag that's never started a game before. He's not Garrett Gilbert. He's not Ben DiNucci. He does not completely stall out an offense. But yes, the offensive line comes into play. The lack of weapons outside of Brandon Cooks and maybe a Philip Lindsay, all of that factors in. I get that. What I'm saying, though, is if you're playing from behind, I think Tyrod Taylor could, have some Blake Bortles type games from when the Jags were terrible, and he's just forced to throw the ball a ton, even if that's not his forte.
Do you worry that, because in a maybe a bizarro world logic, that it's maybe worse that he's not terrible, because Tyrod Taylor can move and he can kind of make plays on his own. I'd almost rather have a hopeless statue where it's like, they're going to be awful, but he has no Alex Smith from last year. He has to check down. There's no other option. Tyrod Taylor can make plays on his own if he wants to.
Yeah, he can for sure. But the thing is, I don't necessarily know how often we should expect him to run. I mean, you're right. He definitely can. But as I think of it, you could be spot on here. But Ben, what if it actually adds another dimension to the offense where they're bad, but they're not one dimensional? So then their lack of weapons is kind of mitigated by the fact that Tyrod Taylor can actually run a little bit, and then he makes the offense not as terrible.
Yeah, that can open something up just for the running game alone.
Right.
It's possible.
Like, look at I'm not saying it will, but I think you look at Lamar Jackson and you look at the running backs. Gus Edwards averages over 5 yards per attempt for his career. Dobbins averaged like 6 last year. You can't tell me. And granted, I'm not comparing Tyrod Taylor's.
About to say that it sounded like you were.
No, that's not what I'm doing. Not comparing his rushing skill set to Lamar Jackson. Obviously, what I'm saying is, if you are like, what if they install Tyrod Taylor and they want him to run a lot, and he does open things up. Of course, I'm not comparing him to Lamar Jackson. Just the overall concept is what I'm saying.
That freaks me out. I'll be honest. If they do that, I think there's a big bump down to these guys.
Well, then would you be willing to take like a late round flyer in a 14-team league or a deep league or a late best ball league on Tyrod Taylor with his rushing upside?
I'd rather do that if that's what they're going to try to do. Just because Baltimore, the reason they can get it done is because they can be hyper efficient. They're one of the slowest, most methodical teams. They take like 8 minutes off the clock.
Absolutely.
And I worry about Houston. One of the ways, if you know you're awful, could be to really try to slow it. And these drives, if they're running a really almost option style offense, it could shorten these games severely. And that is a problem because you need garbage time. That's what we're talking about with a guy like Lindsay.
Let me come full circle on this quickly. This is the way I see it. Because I don't disagree with anything Ben or Eytan is saying, but uncertainty is going to just present opportunity. And that's kind of the thing. We don't know what this offense is going to look like. Might be just god awful. Probably will be. It might be bad, but also to the point where you're like, okay, there's still points being scored, whether it's fantasy points or touchdowns. It might be Tyrod Taylor. It might be Lindsey. It might be Brandon Cooks. And I think all of them are being faded so heavily now because of that uncertainty and because just the overall assumption that they're going to be bad, that you're not really taking on much risk anyway. So if it doesn't work out, okay, I lost a 4th round pick. You know, he doesn't really have much utility. If he does become a 3-down back in an offense that's even remotely competent, like even Jacksonville's offense last year, then I think you might actually get some value. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And just to wrap this whole thing up before we move to the Jets, the Jags were clearly better at opening up running holes than they were protecting the quarterback. So if you have, and as a result of that, James Robinson was clearly able to maximize his own abilities. I'm not taking anything away from Robinson by any means, but point being is that if they realize down there that they actually can move the ball on the ground, it's just about, for me, that they won't abandon it. And that's what I'm looking for. Like, I'm looking at the Jets and I'm trying, just like we talked about with Houston and before that with the Jaguars. Like, I don't want teams that are predicted to be bad to be in so many situations where they're down, where they're abandoning the run. Now, some of it is going to be mitigated by throwing the football to guys coming out of the backfield, but that's the biggest thing for me is like, are you going to be down 21 points? Are you going to be down 17 to 21 points routinely in games because you're dog shit this year and just not even having a running back out there 5 wide to maximize throwing the ball? Because that would be a big deterrent for me across the board here as we look at the Jets.
I'm going to split the difference a little bit. I think in some situations you actually want it to get out of hand. Like, I think the chances guys like Phillip Lindsay, or if we want to talk about these Jets running backs, our threats for the 100-yard bonus is almost 0 in most games. But I think their upside is going to come in when they have 10 targets, 9 catches for 43 yards. That's the equivalent of 2 touchdowns on the ground. Like, that is how you get it done on full point PPR sites. So I look at this, if you can catch the ball, and guys like Tevin Coleman, we'll see what Michael Carter is going to be, the guy we all want to talk about, of course. I think that might be it. I don't know about if I want my bad teams to stay in the games and grind it out. That to me is a little worrisome unless they're better than we thought. There's a middle ground there where that ends horribly, where they're awful, but they're not so bad that they don't abandon the script.
Right. And by the way, Blitz asked, what's up, Blitz? Didn't Houston have the least rushing attempts in the league last year? It was second fewest in front of only the Jaguars. And we saw where James Robinson, I'm not saying any of these guys are going to be James Robinson, just that, bad teams can still produce decent fantasy.
Houston had the quarterback too.
Yeah. Houston had the lowest rushing touchdown percentage in the league last year. And Jacksonville was 3rd lowest, but Robinson still had 10 total touchdowns. To what Ben was saying though, when it comes to a guy like Tevin Coleman actually is a skilled pass catcher. I mean, this guy, if you look at his receiving touchdowns outside of last year, because he was injured and then they phased him out behind a bunch of other players in San Fran, 5, 3, and 3 receiving touchdowns from 2016 to 2018. He is a talented pass catcher. He's also averaged 9 touchdowns per game from 2016 to 2019, which is pretty impressive. So I think that here's how I see this playing out. If you're getting Tevin Coleman as the last pick of your draft, I'm fine with it. There's no risk whatsoever. And there's also no certainty when it comes to that backfield right now. I think Tevin Coleman gets off as the starter, starts off as your starter, and then Michael Carter ultimately takes over the bulk of the workload. But right now it appears that Tevin Coleman is the starter. And if that's the case, you have Carter being drafted around the 8th round, Tevin Coleman being drafted in the 15th or 16th round. I've seen him go even later than that in some spots. Carter's the future there for sure. But Ben, I don't know. You're a college guy. He's a 4th round pick. He was splitting work with Javonte Williams at North Carolina. Had he elected to go into the draft 2 years ago, he probably would have been like a 2nd round pick after a huge year. And then last year just really fell off. And I've heard a lot of people say just that type of archetype is not really a 3-down back in the NFL. Where do you come in on him? Because this could help us kind of sort through this in terms of, can Tevin Coleman actually be valuable, and will Michael Carter be the full-time starter by week 8?
This is one where everyone I think is guilty of this to extent where you kind of got to stick to your guns. Like if Michael Carter wasn't at his ADP, I would think it would be. And someone said, he should be there. I'd say that's crazy, but he is. So it's like, am I missing something? Because everything that I've seen from him in college and so far, it doesn't scream that he's just going to be all systems go and that you're talking about double with Tevin Coleman of where he is. One guy could be the last pick in your draft. The other guy is a mid-range target. I don't see it. Ultimately, I think the most likely scenario is what you said. Tevin Coleman slowly starts to cede more and more work to Michael Carter as the year goes on. But I don't think we're ever going to see a situation where Michael Carter just fully takes over the backfield. Now, maybe he's just going to be amazing. That's possible, of course. But I think you're budgeting a lot of those scenarios with an inside 100 ADP. I'm really stunned about this. I didn't think he was going to get this type of hype when he was drafted.
I mean, Eytan, how many times have we seen this happen where a rookie running back is just a hype machine, and then it turns out that, oh, wait a second, that other guy that's actually, has a pretty robust NFL resume, might be getting up a little bit in years, right? But has a decent enough resume. I'm not just talking about Coleman, but we can get into other guys. Ends up getting a lot of work, and sometimes throughout most of the season, you see it all the time. Now, rookie running backs hit. There's a decent hit rate on that, but I still think it's interesting that a fourth rounder rookie is going drafted that much higher than Tevin Coleman.
Yeah, and especially looking at it 191.4, right, for Coleman's ADP. So you start to look at guys around him and how much deeper they are either on the chart or just the expectation that they'll get time. You mentioned throwing the football. Look, this is a rookie quarterback. He looks like he has at least a grasp of what's going on in the NFL, but this is a long season for Zach Wilson up there in New York. And
I like that kid, man.
I do too. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying
Really?
the team.
Yeah.
I think he can throw. I think he'll be okay. I wouldn't.
That line's going to suck, though. I don't know if they can protect it, which is crazy because you drafted an early first round offensive lineman last year. Then you traded up for the mid first round to draft Elijah Vera Tucker this year. And like, how are you still this bad right now? Apparently they've been so bad in summer and training camp that like Wilson can't stay upright.
Yeah, it's not a good look if you're going to see that in joint practices, let alone game time. And look, I think that's going to be the bigger difference. And you mentioned it where you get this hype from a rookie, and then everybody on a team is aware of their own mortality. Everybody has an idea of what's going to work and maybe preserve them versus where it's going to be a conversation of, hey, you're screwing up, things need to change. You don't want that conversation with the GM, head coach, if you're running the offense. So that's where I think a lot of times it's a really cool idea in the preseason to center around the unknown with rookies. Not to say everybody, as you mentioned, guys hit depending on where they're taken, especially other positions. But week 1, week 3, week 5, when you're getting your ass kicked and you realize one area, one guy works and the other is just not there yet, nobody's beholden to running Carter for 35 touches a game. So that's where I think the hype then meets what's happening. And it's much easier to see if you can throw to Coleman, if he's out there at least gaining decent yardage when he's given the football, then yeah, there's a pathway where at 191.4, he's probably going to be one of the.
The Jets can't be. I just don't know how you can be as bad as you were in the last couple of years. Adam Gase was unbelievable.
He was bad.
That was criminal what he was doing to that team.
And I think Mike LaFleur is probably going to be pretty good, especially coming from the Shanahan coaching tree, right? And then same with Robert Saleh. I think they'll be not good, but not Texans bad. But do you think if they get off to a really bad start, does that give them more incentive to slowly get Michael Carter into it? Or do they say, you know what, break this kid in? Because we all know that in terms of mileage, you're always trying to limit mileage on backs that you plan on having there for a long time. So what do you think it is? Work them in consistently and a lot more if they're bad, or say, you know what, pump the brakes a little bit. Let's just, not to be crass here, but like, who gives a shit about Tevin Coleman? He's not going to be here forever, just.
Are they
but no, I'm saying they suck.
They
like
overall,
they basically know they're not making the playoffs.
Yeah, I think some of it is and I don't want to sound like I'm fence riding or hedging because I'm not. I think a lot of it is where the areas of distress are, to where if Tevin Coleman is a big factor as why they suck, then it's easy, right? It's easy to just say, look, dude, we got to make this change. But not to answer a question with a question, but kind of quasi to answer a question with a question. Maybe it's more of rhetorical. If Coleman is playing well, but the team just sucks, Corey Davis isn't doing what we expect, and Zach Wilson is still having issues coming in. You mentioned the line, Loughy, which is a great point. If Wilson's on his back, it's all moot anyway. Then maybe, and we see this not a lot, but we see this enough in the NFL, where even bad teams kind of hold on to one or two elements that work, knowing that this is really about Zach Wilson this year, I think more so than Carter. So yes, I think your answer, or to the answer to your question for Rasa, I would say, yes, I think that opens up a door for Carter. The only thing I think that would change or maybe mitigate that would be how well Coleman is playing when everything around him is going to shit.
I don't, honestly, because it's a weird situation. The dynamic shifts, but it's not like a quarterback where, not to just jump completely to Chicago or anything, where it's like, all right, they're awful. Let's get Fields in there and let him go and give him some reps. Like Zach Wilson's going to be the quarterback, whether they're great or they win 0 games. They have nobody else. I don't think for a running back where it's all about mileage, you can get Michael Carter into the games. He's going to play in week 1 and he's just going to continue to progress. I don't think they alter that based on how awful or good they are, to be honest. I think the only way that could change is in the small chance I think he could take over, but I see almost no chance that's the case.
I would also make the argument too that the running back position rarely defines or dictates whether a team is playing well or not. Like, to me, it comes down to the quarterback, to the offensive line, to defense. To me, running back really is tertiary, unless you're just one of these elite level backs that makes a massive difference.
All right, let's look at Denver before we get out. And another reminder, of course, to not only subscribe, but like away here on the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel, our Awesemo Odds channel, as well as Awesemo, the mothership, and take advantage. Again, you're going to be hearing a lot about this right up until the start of the season, of our promo code Awesemo for Underdog, best ball draft in town. Over $1 million to the top prize and the big one, with over $3 million in overall prize money going. So sign on if you haven't already. Last show, we had a couple of people who used our promo code thanking us. 25 will match it there. Awesome. All right, let's look at Denver as we kind of wind down these running back battles. And you mentioned Phillip Lindsay gone in Denver, but still trying to figure out, especially, and this is the interesting element to it, we know who the quarterback is. Teddy Covers is starting for the Denver Broncos. So there is a completely different element now, as opposed to the wildly unpredictable Drew Lock. Now, we know that with Melvin Gordon and elsewhere, there's going to be a pathway for a battle. Williams, as you mentioned, Loughy, earlier. So let's just take this kind of big picture standpoint with Teddy Covers kind of as the main focus and driving vehicle to how this can help the running game.
I think it's great for the running game. I don't think it's good for guys like Courtland Sutton, who I really like. And let's get this out of the way first. You guys have heard me say it a lot. Teddy Bridgewater did support 4 players with 1,000+ yards from scrimmage last year. Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, and Mike Davis. That's good, right? But he's also just not the type of guy that is going to, like Drew Lock is willing to chuck it, right? I know that's why Ben loved the guy, because
you need a little Jameis in you. Like, he doesn't have the Jameis gene.
For sure. It had some gunslinger mentality there, and that's cool. But also, and also, Drew Lock's receivers had one of the highest drop rates in the league last year. Judy and KJ Hamler both had the highest drop rates of anyone with 50+ targets. So he wasn't good. Drew Lock wasn't good, but he also got somewhat of a bad rap because they dropped a ton of passes. Anyway, Teddy Bridgewater, the running backs in Denver were targeted like 50 times last year. Teddy Bridgewater targeted his running backs 111 times last year. I think you're going to see a lot of that. And whether it's Javonte Williams or Melvin Gordon, who I think is actually a pretty good value right now, what his ADP, depending on where you're looking, is as low as 120. Melvin Gordon was the RB13 last year. He's actually pretty damn good. Yards after contact per attempt, broken tackle rate. You look at a lot of those numbers that suggest if a guy was productive or not. Goal line conversion rate was solid. He was actually pretty good. This is one of these spots where I am just so not convinced, no matter what you think of Javonte Williams, that he is just going to be the guy. Yeah. And Melvin Gordon still on that Melvin Gordon isn't going to get a hefty amount of work. Philip Lindsay was 1,000 yards rusher in back-to-back seasons, and Melvin Gordon took over as the clear lead back last year. So call me crazy, but this is one of those spots going 5 rounds or more after Javonte Williams, where I think Melvin Gordon might actually still have a pretty damn big role. And I think Bridgewater, no matter who is getting the work, Bridgewater really helps the running backs.
Definitely helps the running backs because he's a very low variance quarterback. He kind of just does what he does. Drew Lock is an insane person, and that would have helped. I will say that Denver is I don't know about this team because they've got a lot that I like. I think there's a lot of opportunity, a ton of weapons, but I'm with you. Javonte Williams, everything we said about Michael Carter, and I'm linking them, of course, because they both went to UNC. I feel the same way about this situation. I think maybe more and more time will be ceded, but Melvin Gordon is, to me, a cut above Tevin Coleman just in general. So like, this is not
for sure.
This guy's a player. Like, it's not just, oh, he's a placeholder and we'll see. Like, Melvin Gordon still has some, I think, good years ahead of him. And if Denver is able to just, be serviceable with Bridgewater in the backfield under center, I think they could be a pretty decent team. They're the type of team, just to kind of give my final thoughts. We were talking about, the bad teams. Maybe they could be okay. I pictured Denver. I think Denver could be a pretty solid bad team this year where it gives the backs opportunities to maybe actually be running the ball and not just playing catch up late in the game.
Yeah, their total's at 8.5 with Bridgewater. Yeah. It's going to be juiced to the under. There's a pathway to 9 games. I wouldn't go any higher than that and say that they could win the division. But this is the anti to everything else we've spoken about, which is, let's just assume the Broncos are 8, maybe 7-9. All right, there's the variance there, right? They're a 7-9 win football team. Chances are that they're not going to be blown out or getting blown out or beat up like the other teams we spoke about, which may actually help, especially if it's Melvin Gordon, who is being drafted multiple rounds. It may actually open up just more touches as a whole for both backs, to where we're not necessarily fighting over snaps or touches like we talked about in other scenarios with bad teams, at least expected bad teams, where they could be out abandoning a run. I mean, clearly, if you look at the pathway to winning 7 to 9 games for Denver, they're not going to be abandoning the run in game nearly as much as these other teams, which ultimately could just bump up the floor for both backs.
Yeah, it could. There's no doubt. But for me, it's just along the lines of, you're spending, what is it, a 6th round pick on Javonte Williams right now? That's
around that, yeah.
Yeah, I
think it's an early 6th, actually.
Loughy, the only other thing I would say, experiment is over. So if Melvin Gordon struggles, goes down, misses games, whatever it may be, and again, you don't draft ahead of time like that, like you don't bet or anything ahead of time for injury, but Williams, let's just say hypothetically, Gordon misses 4 or 5 games or, whatever it may be. Williams is clearly the bell cow at that point and probably lives up to the ADP, but it would take that circumstance, to your point.
Right. But like, if Dalvin Cook misses those games, Alexander Madison is the bell cow and he's got an ADP of 149, right? If Ezekiel Elliott goes down, you've got Tony Pollard or AJ Dillon. If Aaron Jones goes down, and then you're getting all of those guys much later in the draft.
Yeah,
so,
but you're also not in a position battle like you could be with Williams and Gordon.
Right, but Javonte Williams, you're spending a 6th on him, and you still have zero idea what his role is.
Right.
Opportunity cost is huge. So, I don't think it's crazy to draft someone in the last round, not hoping, you're not rooting for it, but with something in mind that there's a small % chance this guy becomes a bell cow with a fluke injury. Because the downside is most likely that doesn't happen, and you waste a low pick. You can't do that with a 6th round pick. You just can't be budgeting for scenarios like that because the opportunity cost is absolutely massive.
That was my concern with Etienne too, right? Like 5th round, 6th round for Javonte Williams could be really good. I think he's going to be good. And they traded up to get him in the early 2nd round. They plan on using this. He's going to be the future bell cow back in Denver. At least that's what they want to do. But you just countless times you see a guy like Melvin Gordon. Melvin Gordon is like the perfect example of someone this year who is a mega thorn in the side for anybody who drafted Javonte Williams in the 6th. And I would be shocked if Melvin Gordon just is like a 5 touch per game guy. It would be shocking to me. So let's just assume they are, even in a 50-50 split. And even if you think Javonte Williams is better than Melvin Gordon, you want the guy in the 6th or do you want the guy in the 11th in that case on a team that's going to have a decent, maybe decent offense? Give me the guy in the 11th all day long.
Absolutely. All right. We're back on Monday. Want everybody to enjoy their weekend. On your way out, if you haven't already, make sure you are subscribed to the Awesemo Fantasy Football channel. Well, all three, Awesemo and our Awesemo Odds channel as well. Hit that thumbs up button. Thank Chris for producing the show at Loughy_D, at JazzRazDFS.
Don't thank his internet, though.
Well, that's he was at least powering through it. Right?
I know.
He didn't
sorry for the choppy stream, by the way. We do our best here. Sometimes the things are out of our control, and apparently Ben and Chris and everyone out there in that part of New York just has.
It's not our fault.
It's now just awful internet right now, and there's no real other place they can go. So,
yeah, and to be fair, I lost an internal bet of what would go first: Rasa's attention span after that breakfast burrito, or
oh my God, death row meal. I tell you what, that would. No, I did not have a hashtag for breakfast, but I had a delicious brisket burrito for lunch, and it was absolutely fire.
I feel like brisket in anything. Like I'd eat brisket and chocolate, and I think it would be great.
Yeah, it was so good. Brisket, little pepper jack.
Oh, pepper
so
jack.
Good. Little like hot sauce barbecue on it.
I put the pepper jack on the Chick-fil-A sandwich. I don't get the spicy, but I get the Chick-fil-A sandwich with pepper jack cheese, a little Polynesian on the side. Oh my God.
Look at you. You already have a routine here.
Yeah.
Giving away your secrets.
That's how the pros. Yeah.
All right. No Jalen Hurts, so you don't have to watch the Eagles game tonight. There's the good news. We appreciate everybody hanging with us. Have a great weekend. We're back Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern time to recap, look ahead. We have a lot of things still to get to before the regular season officially begins. So thanks for riding with us. Have a great day and have a great weekend.
Peace.